Hey, welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey, coming at you. Another great guest tonight. Just spent a long day at the State House in Montpelier. Kind of beat at the moment. But yeah, I was down there checking out some of the testimony from some growers, some retailers, some manufacturers testifying for the Senate Ag Committee. And then they held the press conference at 12:30, and if you guys are interested in checking that out, I recorded the press conference and I slapped that up on my YouTube channel. I want to do the usuals. I want to thank my last couple guests here: Bonita Money from Indica, Brad Racino, New York Cannabis Insider, one of my favorite journalists here, Dr. Carl Craig from Craig Corporate Advantage. Nate Remis. If you guys have been digging my Artist Spotlight series, you gotta check that out. That was a great interview. And what do we got coming up for you? I'm still trying to get a hold of Elliot Lewis here. I hope I can get him on the phone. He's supposed to be coming on Tuesday. I think I'm going to take Sunday off this week, but then next Thursday I'm supposed to get Boss Crossland on here from Rainbow Farms in Michigan. And if you guys don't know what happened out there, I'd encourage you to Google that and take a peek. And then got some West Coast guys. Got Carrie Bennett on Sunday, 18th. I got a Detroit grower, Jim Barry, on the 20th. That's be cool. I don't think I've had any growers from Michigan on, so that'll be a good one. And then I've got a nurse. I finally found me a nurse to come on the show, Megan Mabenge. She's coming on the 22nd, and I'm super excited to catch up with Megan here, see what she's been working on. Yeah, and without further ado, my guest tonight is someone else who's working on some super cool stuff. I met her like a year and a half ago. We had lunch. She brought me some edibles, and then we recently reconnected. And she told me, I just had a great phone call with her, and I was super interested in what she's working on. She is the owner operator of the Baked Gallery of Vermont, P.H.A.R.A.O.H Project Worldwide, and the Cannabis Matrix. My guest tonight, Shawnna DeMatos. Thank you for joining me tonight, Shawnna.
Hey, my pleasure.
Cool. I'm going to turn you up just a little. Before we do anything serious, will you do a 5-minute life story for us?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I was born down in Newburyport, Mass. My family was lower middle class. We lived like a 5-minute walk from the project. We were never really well off. So yeah, I went to elementary school, high school. I went to an ag school, Essex Ag. Unfortunately, I had some personal issues and had to drop out, went back, finally got my diploma, and said, you know what, school is torture. So I did not go back. And moved up to Vermont. My oldest is 21, so 21 years ago. And moved from Burlington to St. Albans to Montgomery. And I've just, I don't know, had my ins and outs with cannabis. My dad smoked for as far back as I can remember. And it's never been an issue, although just like you, Caleb, I did go through the DARE program. So that was like causing a lot of conflict in my early life. Because only bad people do drugs, and cannabis is a drug. So that was kind of like a little bit of a brain warping experience. But I am here and working with a plant that I have learned to love and understand more than I ever thought I would. For sure. I've 5 kids, and that brings us to now.
I'm going to put you in the big box over there.
Okay, I'm in the sandbox. Got it.
I still got to figure out how to just make it start with you in the big box. I have to switch it every time, but I turn it into a theatrical performance.
Yeah, around a little bit. Okay.
Cool. So would you mind telling us about the various, so the first three on your resume here is, let's just go through them. The Baked Gallery of Vermont. Tell us what you're doing with that, please.
All right. So the Baked Gallery is my bakery, which I do infused and non-infused food products for varying occasions, varying age groups, varying people, tastes, whatever. And that kind of funds my projects through the P.H.A.R.A.O.H project, which is like the whole outline that I sent you with the questionnaire. That's pretty much my whole process for that. So my bakery pretty much funds everything else.
And we're going to break that down too.
Yes, that's where all of the interest is.
Yeah. And then the Cannabis Matrix is the other one.
The Cannabis Matrix kind of combines all my knowledge from both of those things, being able to bake with it, and not cook out the things that are in there that you really want, um, and learning how to use cannabis very effectively instead of like throwing hand grenades at issues. We learn how to pinpoint them and treat them like a sniper. That's what the Cannabis Matrix does. That's my Discord. Yeah.
And there's Alex Grosser saying, "Good baker." Thanks,
Yeah.
Alex, for tuning in.
Yeah. I definitely know what I'm doing in that area for sure.
Now, and what I really found fascinating was that you said you don't have a science background really, and you've just taken it upon yourself to dive into some really really specific, like specialized kind of avenues here.
My superpower is I can read. So yeah. I like to read lab reports. I like to look at the variables. I have a really strong instinct when it comes to pattern recognition. I learned that like pretty early on in life. But like crossword puzzles, word searches, things like that take me like a minute. I don't know, like word games, so like easy. Um, so just being able to look for the common thread in things is something that comes supernatural. So for me, it's kind of like a game. Like it's a word search, but we're searching for this particular thing that triggers something else. Like let's go see what we can find. Let's hit the internet.
I love it. I love a good rabbit hole, and it sounds like you're in a deep one. And by the way, if anyone's watching this tonight, I've been looking out for people that are kind of involved in similar types of research, and hoping maybe someone will see this and we can connect you guys.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I've not heard of anybody who does exactly what I do, and I would love to be able to just like kind of like geek out over cannabis with somebody who understands the little intricacies of it the way that I do. It's a really interesting and fascinating plant, and the more I learn about it, the more there is to love, you know?
Hmm, absolutely. Amen. And I'm supposed to do this every 10 minutes or so. I'm with Shawnna DeMatos, the Baked Gallery. Um,
Woohoo.
so on the phone, you told me some incredibly personal stories, Shawnna, and I know some of those weren't probably the most comfortable, but if
Yeah,
you're comfortable sharing that stuff, I mean, it sounds like this is like deeply personal to you, and I certainly have had my own personal um, family experiences, but I'd love to hear about that if you don't mind sharing.
yeah. So, whew, yeah. um, Last month was a pretty rough month. There's a lot of things that are, in the date between January 1st and the end of the month. And um, 2 years ago, I lost my brother to cancer. Um, I think it was just around 4 years between the time of his first diagnosis to the day that he was taken off life support. Um, it was a pretty hard thing to go through. He's the person that kind of like held our family together. And watching his battle, just, first it was he was having trouble breathing at work and stuff, and they went in and did a scan and they found there were multiple tumors in his lungs, so they just took the whole thing out. And then, he went back in the hospital and he was having some headaches and some pressure, and they did another scan and found a tumor behind his eye, so they took that out too.
Wow.
And you know, he went in the hospital the third time to have a kidney removed, and the other one never started working up to the point where it needed to work. And they had him on dialysis, and he just went downhill from there. And he didn't end up making it out of the hospital. And unfortunately, the day that was decided on to take him off life support was also my dad's birthday. And my birthday is a week later. So it makes the whole month feel really shitty.
Mm.
There's not much to celebrate.
Alex
But
sends his sorry over to you. Alex, thanks, man.
yeah, so I feel like instead of taking people apart in pieces, maybe we should put them into a state of homeostasis where the body can repair itself. Because, like, my favorite thing to say is disease. The whole word disease tells you it's a state of the body not being at ease. And so if we can use cannabis, which we know it can do that because there have been plenty of research to suggest that that's the case, um, we can cure this stuff without having to take people apart to do it.
Mm. And didn't you say this was like during COVID or something, and you guys couldn't even go see him?
Yep.
Wow.
I went and sat outside the hospital, sat outside because they wouldn't let me in.
Wow.
So it was really rough.
And I only asked. Thank you for sharing, Sean. I know that's probably not an easy story to think about, but I definitely had. When my grandma died like 2 days before she died, I got to feed her a little bit of edibles, and it was like the last time she could get any food down. It was the last time she got up and like moved, and she was like not in pain for the last time in her life, and that was she was on so many fucking opiates, and um she had cancer everywhere, and it was fucking miraculous. And oh, look, you made Alex cry and bawling. I I'm right there with you, man. That was touching. But yeah, so like that was a really big moment for me. Like I always knew that edibles worked, but when I saw how well it worked, even I was kind of taken aback. I was like, holy shit, like that was even better than I thought it was gonna be. And, my
Right?
family got to see that too, and they were like, huh, maybe.
What can it do? Like, that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's like such a little tiny, view in the mirror. It's like looking in the rear view compared to like the whole windshield. It's like just a tiny little speck.
Mm. And so that was really what grabbed me about the stuff you're working on is sort of trying to target things specifically. And I think this was a great quote. You said cannabinoids are the scope on the gun and terpenes are the bullets or something. But I'd love to hear how you what you're looking at. You were talking about just targeting certain organs or certain like eyes or something. I believe you talked about something about beta carotene that was super fascinating. Maybe you could
That's
tell us.
That's one of my favorite research projects. It was one of the first ones that I did, where I had been told something for my whole life that just did not make sense when I got older and realized what's actually going on. Um, a lot of times people take stuff that they've been told like at face value as fact. And like when you're little, like you don't question that stuff. Like beta carotene is good for your eyes. It's what's in carrots. It's good for you. Um, so if you read any of the literature on beta carotene, it's actually a molecule that your body can turn into vitamin A if it has a deficiency. If not, it simply is a pigment. So when you're going to the store and you're seeing things with like orange food coloring and it has beta carotene as a dye, that's pretty much what it is, unless your body needs to convert it. If you sit around all day and eat carrots, and I had a friend, Judy, who lives out in Utah now, and she actually did this, and this is how this kind of like got onto my radar. She loved carrots, and so she ate carrots, like bags of carrots, like a friggin' 5 pound bag of carrots would last for 2 days. Like she was a rabbit, like a carrot fiend. And one day I walked up to her house to visit her when I lived in St. Albans, and she came and answered the door, and her skin was like orange, like a bad spray tan. And I said, Judy, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, it's carotenitis. That's what happens when you eat too many carrots. And I was like, holy hell, carrots are not supposed to dye you orange. And this was the first time that I ever had like this question in my brain, like beta carotene, if it's not more than a food pigment, why is that why is everything like, oh, beta carotene is good for you, beta carotene is good for you? Not so much. I went and did research on carrots. I think I sent you that report as well, from the National Institute of Health. And they did this research project on 85 different cultivars of carrot and the terpenes that are actively in carrots. And I had done research on terpenes before, like working with cannabis, and I had found a terpene on there that I had never heard of before. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe this is hiding in plain sight for a good reason. So I went and grabbed a strain that I looked up, and it contained, a really high amount of borneol. Borneol. Let's say that again. Everybody hear it. Borneol. Um, so I made some FICO from this, and I decided that I was going to use it in a recipe, with peanut butter, because that's slow release and I want it to leach out into the system really slowly. And I did this for a month. It was a 1 month treatment, for somebody with macular degeneration. Also happens to be my dad, who is older and has never had bad eyesight a day in his life, and had started just needing glasses to even watch TV. So and he was saying, that they're a pain in the ass and he doesn't like them. And obviously, when you're older, you have enough shit to worry about than losing your glasses or having to take them off and on and all that hoopla. So I was like, well, let me just do this experiment. And I didn't tell him. I just said, I have this thing that I really want to test out. And do you mind trying it? And he's like, is it just eating more treats? Like, I'm good with that. And I'm like, okay, so this is going to work good for me. So I brought that down there, and after, like, I didn't tell him what they were for or anything. I'm just like, okay, this is an extra thing I want you to try, and just let me know. And after a month, without like any solicitation or anything, I'm just like, if nothing happens, then nothing happens. I'm an idiot. It's okay. I'll just go back to doing what I do. And he just wrote me a message on Instagram, like a little bit after the end of the month, and he was like, I think your edibles are helping my eyesight. And I was just like, oh shit, like that actually worked. I'm so happy. Like that's actually like really, really, really good. Um, so, one step in the right direction, right? So yeah, it's things like that. And like I had to call the laboratory here in Vermont and be like, you guys don't test for borneol. Like, why? And they're like, well, it's not on the list that we get to test. But you can always, set up your own specific parameters that you want to see and see if the lab will actually do that. So if I wanted to go and have like my own tests done, of course I'd have to like be paying extra for that shit, but I could actually get them tested for the specific terpenes that I'm looking for. So that's pretty cool that they're willing to do that. Just as a side note.
Yeah, and so you mentioned uh Borneo, and you said maybe you were looking for weed strains that have that in it.
Yeah, yeah. There are some places you can look online that will tell you, like Google is my best friend. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of digging. Don't look at the first page. Maybe look at like the last page, the ones that they're trying to bury. But like you can look up like cannabis strains that are high in Borneo, and it'll give you a list. And luckily for me, I was able to get one of the ones at the top of the list was sour diesel. And luckily for me, like I can get that really easily because, it's here. So it's something that I work with regularly. So just condense it down and get the Borneo as condensed as I can and put it in a recipe that's gonna have it like really slowly release into the system and saturate it for a month. And he hasn't really needed glasses except for the ultra fine prints. So so it's been like a year and a half since just before I met you is when I did that. So that was one of the first experiments that I did, which was super fun. And so, yep, eyesight back to pretty much normal. So that's freaking awesome.
That's amazing.
It is. It's pretty freaking neat.
Hell yeah. And it sounded like you also were like helping some people with arthritis, which I'm super interested if you've had any success with that because I got the psoriatic arthritis and I'd I'd love some targeted relief.
Yeah. So let's see, arthritis. Went to the doctor, was prescribed the opiates, steroids, and the methotrexate, which you're really familiar with. That shit sucks. Um, Sorry, my language is really bad.
You're fine. We can square on this show.
Okay, it's after hours. It's not, PG. Okay. So yeah, so started cannabis therapy about I don't know, roughly three years ago, maybe four. And first thing we got rid of was the opiates for sure. Then we worked on the steroids, and now I'm trying to work a more herbal route, not just cannabis solo, because cannabis solo is not going to fix that shit. Um, if it hasn't done it in 4 years, it's not going to start now. So I think by pairing the cannabis with different herbal supplements that I have found some research on that's really promising research, um, that maybe I can work out a supplement to work in conjunction with the cannabis so that it can facilitate a more overall effect, I guess you would say. Like I want to boost the entourage effect, and the entourage effect happens between endocannabinoids, cannabinoids, terpenes, diaterpenes. It's the whole list of different, the flavonoids, all the different components that you put in your system. So by pairing that with different herbal medicines, you can boost that entourage effect. And that's what's in the amplifier matrix that we were talking about the other day,
Ah,
is stuff that works in conjunction with that whole system.
mm. Shawnna DeMatos, the Baked Gallery, joining me tonight. And I found interesting was that, I saw the research that Raphael Mechoulam did where they discovered the CB1 and CB2 receptors, but then I just recently learned, and I sent you the story that Olin wrote about with the cool diagram of the body, that there's all these other receptors all throughout your body.
Yeah, that's all. This whole list right there, like the cannabinoid targeting system. That's all what I do.
Will you tell us the other ones that are not CB1 and CB2?
Oh, there's so many, Caleb. Okay, so the ones that I have been doing the most work with are CB1, CB2, the TRPV1, TRPV2, GPR 1855, and 119. So TRPV is transient receptor potential vanilloid 1 and 2. It's a transient receptor because it's not coupled to a neural synapse. So CB1 and CB2 receptors are either presynaptic or postsynaptic. So they work like along nervous system meridians, where transient receptors don't. Also, the GPR receptors are G protein coupled receptors, which work usually in more areas where there's not a lot of nerve endings, like in the intestinal tract and the bones and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was wild to me. That it's like in your bones and your skin and like everywhere.
They're everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And that's one of the things that I was, we had the conversation about some other people that were dealing with patients and specific issues that they have with those patients. But like I'm just gonna show you here on my little notes, like the CB1 receptors target like nerve endings and things like that. And down here in the TRPV section, TRPV2 is mostly like in the skin. And then down here we have the GPR 18 are like in the testes and other places like that down here. So if you're having an issue, like you're having a tumor, it's really important to know whether it's just subdural, like right under the skin, if it's in the tissue, if it's on a nerve, because that all dictates how you need to target that specific thing. So all of that stuff makes a huge difference. And then you were telling me this stuff is like gibberish to you.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm still, I'm familiarizing myself with some of it, but yeah, it's all very new. 5 years ago, it was all just weed to me.
Right,
And
right,
that's what it
right.
was the whole time. And now there's this whole matrix, if you will, of other things in there.
So check this out. So this is what I'm talking about like if you're using like THC or Delta 9 to trigger a CB1 response, like that stuff will turn it on, right? But over here, like you have THCV, THV, and you have CBG, which then turns the exact same receptor off. So if you're using both THC and CBG to target that same receptor, you're not going to get a really good outcome because half of them are going to be switched on and half of them are going to be switched off. So it's like there's no connection through the neural network. Like the terpenes can't get to where they're going. That cannabinoid relay can't go to where it's supposed to go to do that healing process if you have half on and half off.
Huh.
So
Yeah.
that's why it's like important to know what you're trying to target and what cannabinoid you're going to use to target it, because some go on, some go off, and some do both for different receptors.
Right. So you said it's like a light switch, right? Like the agonist like turns it on and the antagonist turns it off.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
And also, I wanted to back up. I had a note here that I totally skipped over, but something about specific terpenes being injected into tumors and having like 100% cell death. Is that something like a study that you read or something?
Yeah, that is a study that I read. I'm getting my giant notebook of terpenes over here.
Oh yeah.
Let me see. This is why I write all this stuff down, because my brain does not have room for all this. There's over 100 terpenes. Are you crazy?
Yep.
Like, no, and most of these terpenes have like what, 2 or 3 names a piece. I don't even, well, beta carotene is also humulene. Like, I don't even, whatever. Let me look this up. I have a big note full of terpenes.
I bet you got lots of notes over there, Shawnna.
I have so many. I have like my giant collection of notes and books and all the things, and yeah, all the things. Go big or go home, right? So they did a study. I remember it was in 2016, I do believe. That was the 2001. That was my study on osamine. It's good for hypertension. They did a 2015 study on that it lowered all instances of hypertension. Let me see. Anyways, while I look for this,
Yeah.
I was really amused about that whole Leafly incident.
What happened? Tell us about it.
Oh, I sent you the screenshots of everything. I went on their website and they were saying about how Phytol is really, really good for, calming you down and restoring your sense of balance and all this lovely stuff. And I sent them a link to the study that was done in 2020, where it kills rats in like 2 days. And they took it down. I wish they just would have put up a warning and been like, hey guys, if your vapes contain extra amounts of Phytol, maybe you might not want to be smoking that or vaping it or getting it inside your body. Anyway. Let me see.
If you're still looking, I'll ask you the next question about, there was another compound you talked about that was found in oranges.
Oranges, Valencine, yes, sir.
What are the applications for that? You said skin maybe or something?
Yes, Valencine is very effective at healing anything to do with skin. It is also very good at healing, like if you have psoriatic arthritis and you start having like the little skin issues where it gets dry and bumpy and ouchy, and that part of it, that will be really, really good for that. This is why, like, God doesn't fuck up. There's a reason why when you peel oranges, it sprays everywhere, your fingers get all sticky and shit. That's because it's good for your skin. If it gets on your skin and it can soak in, it's going to do what it needs to do. So that's like, I'm just like, all these things have built-in delivery methods. You know what I mean? Like, peel some freaking oranges, you'll feel better. Yeah, all that stuff. So it's a study on limonene. It says it is good for lung cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer. It works on anti-metastasizing, which means that your cancer won't be spreading. And it works for breast cancer. Now, it doesn't work for all cancers, but it works for those specific types. Although it does help with like lowering cholesterol. These are all like little, it helps with ADHD too, which is kind of cool. These are all like little studies that I found for this particular terpene, but there's lots of different, oh yeah, here's my other one. It's bisabolol. Have you heard of bisabolol?
No.
Okay. This is a this is a very cool one. It has some of the same terpenes that you find in chamomile. It is an anti-cancer, anti-skin lesion. There's a 2015, so a 2015 study done on it, where it produces 100% apoptosis in gliomas, which are brain cancer, and pancreatic cancer and leukemia.
Wow.
So, yeah. So apoptosis is like the self-destruct sequence for cancer cells because they shouldn't really exist. They're not natural. So it's your body's way of getting rid of them. They kind of have a fail-safe so that they don't keep multiplying. And if you can push that button, gone.
And I believe you mentioned something about lavender too.
Oh yeah, lavender and menopause. Yep, linalool. Linalool is a great terpene. It promotes, well, lavender is an adaptogenic. So it helps your body not only like get over stress, but mitigate the effect that stress has on the body. So if normally you would, your blood pressure would go up, your heart rate would go up, your breathing would get shallow, stress affects us that way. And when you're using something with that particular terpene in it, like lavender, which is very high in linalool, it'll keep you calm. It'll take that edge off. It'll recenter you. It'll bring you back to being you and not like just the overwhelm due to stress.
Hmm. That
Sorry.
sounds great. I could use some of that sometimes.
Me too.
Oh yeah, and before we break down this questionnaire, I had one more for you. Where the fuck?
Okay.
Oh shit. Did I lose it? I think I might have lost my spot. I always forget at least one question. Oh, I believe you mentioned you were also working with some people that had eating disorders, and I was curious how that was going.
Yeah, that one is actually really complicated. That is something that, you had Dr. Craig on the show and he said he was up for questions. This is a question that I hit him up about because me, I know my limitations, okay? Um, so here you go. Craig consulting. Um, so when I'm dealing with people with the eating disorders, it's really important for me to be able to get those cannabinoids into their body in a way that their body can accept them and put them to use. With this particular person, it's really difficult for me because most of us have this enzyme in our liver that can uncouple our cannabinoids from lipids. And lipids are a great way to get cannabinoids into the body. Um, Fat. Lipids are fat. Okay. For anybody that's confused, cannabinoids have a very vast affinity for fats. They like to stick to fats. It's like screwing a light bulb into a socket. They just stick. Um, so this particular person does not have the enzyme that the liver creates that unscrews the cannabinoid from the lipid.
Oh,
So yeah, so it's very difficult. So they can eat like 40 edibles and not feel anything. It's very distressing for someone like me. It's like you should only need one of these about every 6 hours. So so that's been like a really hard thing for me, especially because, smoking has all like the negative effects, like the coughing and the buildup and all the very unhappy things. Um, so I'm working on trying to figure out another way to extract the cannabinoids out of the cannabis without having to use lipids, which is something that, yeah, I definitely need help from a chemist because because I got nothing.
got a
So,
couple. Maybe we could get you in touch with Dr. Mark Sheldone or
oh,
the kid down in Hardwick, Eric Kafka. He owns a company called Spring Your Way VT. He was doing some very interesting extractions down there, and he's another. I think he's got a master's in organic chemistry. I'll put you in touch with some of those guys for sure.
oh, that's cool. That's
Oh
cool.
yeah, we can do that. All right, cool. So I want to break down. You sent me this questionnaire with this list of questions, which I assume you're giving to people that you're potentially going to work with. What type of things are you asking them, and why?
Okay. Um, Man, I don't have a questionnaire in front of me, so like name,
You want me to
age,
go down? I got it.
like how old are you? Like what's your name? Like relatively easy contact information. I don't care like where you live, but I want to know what state you live in, just because there are legal issues with dealing with people. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Um, so just to like keep myself covered in that way, I asked them if they have been to a dispensary, because I want to know if this has been problematic enough for them to already be seeking to treat themselves with cannabis. And if they've gone to a dispensary, how cannabis literate are they? So, like, what was your experience like? Were there positives? Were there negatives? Maybe you got pain relief, but you also got paranoia. Um, I want to know how it affects you so that I know where on that scale you end up, because it's all about being able to balance. If you're on the left side of the scale, where you can deal with high amounts of THC, then I won't worry too much about having to balance the other direction. Me, on the other hand, I have a lot of anxiety. So like my scale is already kind of like tipped that way. So I kind of like steer away from high amounts of THC if I can, just because they screw with my brain. I get paranoid. I get anxiety attacks. I used to take 4 pills a day for anxiety and all that stuff. So panic attacks and that. So I currently don't medicate with anything but cannabis when I need it. Um, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I do that. Yeah, right. Um, so I can do that for myself, but like that gives me a good level of what kind of a strain I'm going to be looking at due to how it affects you. Because if you're generally like an upbeat person, but you have some anxiety, I'm not going to want to be giving you something that's super high in THC because it's going to make you freak out. Um,
Yeah, it might.
Also, some other research that I was just doing, and if you want, I can send you copies of this stuff because this was really cool. Men have a higher tolerance to THC due to the fact that their natural endocannabinoids are always like overproducing because their CB1 receptors are less efficient at processing cannabinoids.
Well, bullshit. Fuck. That means I've been paying extra. We should get a discount for having to deal with this shit.
I love that. I was like, oh, maybe this is why more females I hear have problems with high amounts of THC than guys. Guys are like, give me all the THC, you know what I mean? And more girls are like, too much. It gets me kind of, you
Uh,
know.
I
So
agree. What I've seen from all of my years of eating edibles, most of the people that get the panic attacks and stuff, and it's definitely I've come pretty close a couple times. Don't get me wrong, but it does seem to be more women, and that's a very interesting theory. And I'd
yeah,
like to learn more about that for sure. That's curious. I've never heard that.
yeah. I was reading this information. So women produce less um, anandamide and 2-AG than men do, but our receptors are more effective at using it.
Huh.
So even though we have less of it, we get more of it into our system at a time because they're more efficient.
Hmm.
So if our body is processing the external cannabinoids that we're getting out of a plant and at that same ratio, yeah, it's gonna make us freak the fuck out. Like, what else do you expect?
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's just understanding those little intricacies like that. Um, that and that's why I made up this sheet, this questionnaire, because it just helps me understand like where that person is coming from. Like it asks at the bottom, like describe your personality in 5 words. You know, if somebody says, um, I'm quiet and reserved, and those are not the kind of people that I'm going to be like, yeah, let's give you 33% cannabis, THC high cannabis. Like, I'm not going to do that to you. I give you something more like mid-level. And that's that's why in my educational stuff on the cannabis matrix, um, I talked with Ben over at Off Piste and asked him if I could use his COAs. Yeah, peace to Ben. Thank you. I love and appreciate the fact that you'll let me use that specific strain, because I would back that strain like no matter what it was called, even though it has a little bit of a weird name, Pudding Hill cheese. It's a little weird, but it's okay. We'll deal with it. But that strain, like, it has a little bit lower of THC. It has pretty high CBD, and it has a good amount of myrcene, which, if you don't know, is an amplifier for the psychoactive effect of THC. So it's still going to feel like it has THC in it, but not overly THC. So if where you have a strain that's like over 20% THC, and then you have like myrcene as one of your highest three terpenes, it's going to be really in the head. Most of your CB1 receptors are in your head, they're in your brain, and then a few of them throughout the body and the nervous system. CB2 receptors are the opposite, mostly in the body and a few in the brain. So if you're, THCing yourself up, then you're gonna, and you have head issues like I have anxiety, it's just an issue, but it'll put you up in your brain real quick, and it probably won't be pleasant for any of us that have anxiety or other issues like that. What else is on the questionnaire?
And before we do that, Ben was at the State House today giving some fantastic testimony to the Senate Ag Committee. Always nice seeing Ben. But yeah, if you want to go down the list, I got the other 13 points. I think we touched on some of this, but
yes.
First is the questionnaire. And the other thing I did want to ask is the wait, that's number 3. We can get there. All right. So number 2 on the list says breakdown. What is breakdown?
It's where I get the little questionnaire and I go through it and break it all down. That's I look for my key points, any red flags like eating disorders, any health issues, anxiety, peace to my anxiety people, things like that, right?
Hi.
So, from my days of teaching Sunday school, I deal a lot in visuals. So I have this little scale here, and I don't know, I might have to move this back a bunch, but
Scales
you
of
can,
justice.
okay, so there's a little scale here, right? And this is like what I would kind of like use to kind of figure out where people need to be, whether THC or CBD. If you have anxiety, we're going to lean towards CBD. If you have, stole my rock. If you have like bipolar disorder and things like that, we're going to lean to the left. Like, so anyways, the whole point is if you know where you're sitting, like I sit kind of this way, like I'm a CBD heavy, THC less kind of a person, at least a 70-30 split or better, towards, CBD. I could go up to probably like a 40-60, but I wouldn't just like be like, yeah, I'm going all in for the THC, like screw that. No, thank you. I'd end up in the freaking psych ward. That's what would happen. So for me, it's really important to maintain that balance so that you can get to the point of homeostasis. So, okay, so my visual, I hope that was like enough for you guys, like just understand that point. But yeah, that's kind of what I use that stuff for. Is the breakdown is like what stuff am I looking at? What has to be in my pool of consideration? Another one of the questions is like, do you live alone? I would not recommend high levels of THC for a person that lives alone, or like, who do you live with? I think that's the way I worded it, like, who do you live with? Just because I don't want people like, why you want to know if I live alone? That's a weird question. Like, it's not because I want to go rob your house. I didn't ask you for your address for a reason. I just want to know, like, if I send you home with medication, you're not gonna like freak out and die or something. It's for your safety, first time cannabis use can be unpredictable, so I want to make sure you're in a safe environment. That's all. Um, so just things like that are like relatively important. And I don't know. I know I've talked to you before about the whole medical versus rec and like the issues that I have with the medical. And like if there are people walking in the dispensary and they're there with a medical card and you're not asking them what they're trying to treat, you're doing them and you both a disservice, because that's no different than the rec. So why do we have a distinction? You know?
The medical program has been a major fucking disappointment, in my opinion.
It has for me, because if I'm sitting in my freaking room, like being able to like find all this shit about how to treat stuff, like why? Like they pay you for this shit. Nobody's paying me for this.
Somebody should.
Somebody someday might, I don't know, but I might be in the grave before that happens. I don't know.
Here we go.
But
Shawnna DeMatos. Another shameless slap. I just want to get that up there. The baked gallery. Yeah, carry on.
yeah, so I don't know what else is on there.
So number 3 is an interesting one that I definitely want to hear about, is medication interactions.
Yeah, so who so there are specific medications that can interact with specific terpenes. There are a lot of terpenes which can interact with medications and make them act as a potentator, which makes your medication either get into your system faster or burn through your system faster or just feel more amplified than they should be. Because with most pharmaceuticals, your prescription is over the dosage that it actually says, because they know that not all of it's going to get into your system. So if you're supposed to be getting 10 milligrams, they'll give you a 25 milligram, because only 10 of it's going to absorb into your body.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
I'm definitely curious if there's a relationship, because like, you know, I got to take Humira for the arthritis. I'm like, I wonder if that, like, maybe I'm not getting my full benefits of the weed or something, you know, like I hope it's not interfering.
yeah, sometimes it can. Usually they see that with things like cholesterol medication, heart medication, which could end up being a little more dangerous than one would want, um, and things like that. I haven't really heard about anything in that department, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't really researched that far into that specific drug interaction list yet.
Keep me posted.
I will do that.
Yeah, so I think the next few on the list, number 4 is cannabinoid targeting. I think we touched on that.
Yes,
Number
sir.
5, number 5 is agonist versus antagonist, and we checked that box. Number 6 is terpene therapy use and selection, and I think we touched on a number of the different terpenes and maybe their applications. Number 7 was strain identification. I think we touched that a little bit, but you know, you mentioned the sour diesel and stuff like that. I'd be curious, as you research more, if you find things that are working specifically well for certain applications.
Yeah. That one
And
is fun because, like, okay, this is a thing that confuses a lot of people. But if you have autoflowers versus, like, I don't know, regular standard photoperiod flowers, you can always clip and regrow a photoperiod flower, where you can't do that with an autoflower, because they're gonna flower based on age, not by maturity. Where photo will, they'll grow, you know, when you flip them to flower and they have their cycle change to 12/12. Um, so something that's interesting with that is that each time that you pop a seed for an auto, you're ending up with a different ratio of cannabinoids and terpenes. Because like you wouldn't look like your sister or your brother. I mean, there's 4 kids in my family. None of us look exactly identical. You know what I'm saying?
I kind of do look like my sister. You picked a bad example there, but a little bit.
but you have like different traits. You may be similar, but it's like even twins have different DNA. Just because you look the same on the outside doesn't mean it's the same on the inside.
Mm.
So this is the problem with like autoflower plants, is that a lot of times they don't have the same ratios of things that you really want to be really stable in your cannabis strains, especially when you're using them for medicine. And that's one of the things that I have a lot of trouble with when I look up all this information on cannabis strains and people treating, especially like cancers with cannabis. And they're like, oh, well, it worked for like 5 out of, the 7 people that we treated. Well, why didn't it work for the other 2? Well, what is their physiology? What is different than the other 5 people, And, you can find a strain that actually works with that, but you need to have something that's consistent. And autoflowers, they do the job, but they don't have that consistency in the DNA and the makeup that they have. So that's one of the issues that I've had with just working with flower in my own life over here. So touch on that for like half a second. Um, when I have a strain, I want it to be photo so that I can use it over and over and over, and I can keep it alive for like a year or 2 years and have a mom plant. That's the point of that, is to have that same phenotype over and over and over and over, because it has the same thing in it over and over and over. Consistency.
Mm. What are you growing in, Shawnna? Are you using living soil, or what's your growing method?
Well, here in Vermont in the winter, um, I am doing hydro at the moment, deep water culture. Um, and we are using a lot of added microbes and things like that to keep that kind of like living soil kind of. It's not the same. I know it's not the same, but to kind of give it that same kind of feel, it's like it has those things to break down those nutrients so that the plant can absorb it easier. And I was just telling you that right now, we are trimming and harvesting Olin's early Durban. So I'm excited to work with that a little bit.
Right
It's a
up to
very
all. Yeah. High
word up.
Pines cultivation.
Yep. So that's super
Formerly,
future
what was it called? Oh, I forgot.
future seeds.
There we go. Yeah, Future Seeds. Olin Schumacher, great guy. Yeah. So number 8 was the amplifier matrix, and I think we hit on that too. Kind of things that are like amplifying the entourage effect, huh? And like
Absolutely.
linalool, that was
All
on there. Then we got number 9 was the recipe construction.
oh, that's fun. That's so fun. I could spend hours talking about that. My my assistant, word up if she's watching out there. Um, she's amazing in college. But will always help me, like, if because we bake a lot, we talk about food, we both love food a lot. Um, but when you're stuck and you're like, okay, I have this terpene, and like the notes for the flavor and aroma of that specific terpene that you're trying to boost is like skunk, and you're like, I don't want something that tastes like skunk. Like, it's not like a Birdie Boss every flavor bean, it's not like, oh, I get a vomit flavored one, that's great, how enticing. um so we we have to sit down and really go through what is it that we can either pair with this to kind of like hide the flavor a little bit, or what is it that we can pair with it that's going to just like run over it so nobody even knows it's there. um and I give this experience is one of my favorites, and I talk about this on the Cannabis Matrix as well. um I had the opportunity to be gifted some Durban poison. And this is why I wanted to work with that early Durban strain. It's pretty awesome. My friend had it and he was like, I don't really enjoy smoking this. It's got kind of like a funky flavor to it. I'm not into it. Just like have it, get it out of my sight. Um, so I'm always like down for a challenge. I'm like, all right, what am I gonna make with this? Because it's got that little bit of funkiness to it. Okay, let's see if we can work with that. Um, so I spent, a few minutes just sitting there, like smelling this jar full of weed. And I'm like, do you know what's under that little bit of funkiness? It's kind of like a little, kind of like burnt, almost like a singed kind of a smell. So I'm like, that would pair really well with like coffee, something that's roasted and it already has that like rich kind of a burnt flavor to it. And then I was like, it's even better than that, butterscotch. So I made some freaking out of this world butterscotch cookies with Durban poison, and I brought him some, and I'm like, here, check these out. And he ate it, and he's like, these are freaking great. What strain did you use for this? He's like, maybe I wouldn't mind smoking it. I'm like, it's the Durban poison you gave me.
In your face.
Right? So you never know. Like you might end up liking something that you thought you wouldn't like just because it tastes one way when you smoke it because the terpenes are just all like burning straight into your mouth. It's like you can't hide that flavor, but when you're pairing it with something that not only complements that flavor but also gives it like more aspects to it and amplifies it, that's kind of like that direction that I like to take things in. And I also say in that post that if I would have paired that with something like strawberry or some other kind of like a fruity flavor, it would have ended up tasting like rancid fruit salad because that, literally you would have had that little funky kind of burnt flavor on top of fruit. It wouldn't have ended up being the best thing in the world, but it's just you have to work with the terpenes, not try and like paddle your boat against the ocean. It's not gonna work out.
Word up. It's like trying to kick water uphill.
Right? It's true. It's not gonna work out in your favor.
We got all right, we got number 10. Here we go. Oh, Jason Stefano checking in. This shit is so interesting. Also, Woke Shaman, I see you watching here talking about caffeine. He's been whoever that is been watching a lot. And
Caffeine.
much
Caffeine is
love,
fun.
Couch Grocer. Yeah.
Yep. Alcohol as well. Alcohol will boost the absorption rate of cannabis out the wazoo.
Oh,
And also, like if you drink beer when you're having like edibles, because of the the whole entourage effect and the fact that myrcene boosts the psychoactive effect of THC, and also that same myrcene, that same terpene is also found in hops, which they use to brew beer. So you're amplifying that like so many different ways to Sunday. It's not even funny.
well, I certainly have put a few drinks down the hatch in my life. I want to
Be honest, guys.
zip through the rest. I'm getting kind of tired here, Shawnna, but I want to get through the rest of this list.
Sure.
And since I got Jason here, hey, Jason used to work for the NYPD. I just want to show you something real quick. I got these sweet stickers today, Jason. Don't buy weed from cops. Thought you'd get a kick out of that, but Jason's all right. So yeah, where are we going? We're gonna put you back in the big. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So number 10 on the list is decarboxylation spec.
Yes. So, okay. The most delicate terpene that I found is humulene, and humulene will volatilize off or burn off, cook off at 225 degrees. So if I am really like dead set on getting humulene into my edible, I'm gonna keep my oven dead ass under that temperature because I don't want to lose that terpene because it's something that's going to be helping the person that I'm trying to treat. You know what I mean? So I have all these specs and stuff up on my Discord, all the charts, all the fancy stuff. so that people can look at this stuff and realize like, oh, well, this is how you do this, you know? So if like this one, Bisabal, I have the temperature that it volatilizes off at. I have all this stuff in my notes so that when I identify that terpene, I can flip through my notebook and know how hot I can put my oven before I'm losing the terpene that I'm trying to isolate.
Awesome. That's probably pretty handy to know.
Yeah, it is. Like, not all terpenes volatilize off at the same temperature. So if you're decarbing something at like 300 degrees, you're going to lose this terpene and all the ones that volatilize off under that temperature. So it's really important to keep that, you know, in your mind and be like, well, what is a safe temperature to work with this terpene, you know?
Awesome. Awesome stuff. And so, all right, we got the last three here. We got infusion, extraction, and execution.
Absolutely. So my infusions, like I said, are mostly lipid based. So I use butter or I use coconut oil. Those are the two that will pull the most amount out of the plant because of their binding affinity to those specific, I guess, lipids. So that's what I do. After I decarb my cannabis, I set it on the counter and let it cool off a little bit. I also decarb it on parchment paper so it's not sitting directly on the metal cookie sheets. So that way it's not heating up as hot as the cookie sheets. It's just getting that air temperature. It keeps it a little bit, it gives me a little wiggle room. So I will let it cool off and then I will put it in like a mason jar on the bottom, and then I'll cover it with my whatever my binding agent is, if it's butter or if it's coconut oil. And then I will put it in a pot of water on the stove with a cloth between the pan and the jar. Again, I don't want to heat it up that much because I'm so picky about like losing terpenes. If I can smell the terpenes coming out of my weed, I'm not happy. I'll start freaking out. Like, you can't do that. No, get back in there, you know? So I cover all that stuff and you leave the cover off, but just set it in a pot of heating water. And like if it's cold butter, I'll just let the butter melt in there over the cannabis. And then I just screw the cover on when it's all nice and melted, and I sit there and just shake the hell out of it. You know, I learn a lot of shit from Frenchy Cannoli. I know he's a hash maker, hashishin, like master hashishin. But the way that he talks about the plant and the trichomes and getting them off the plant, that's like my goal is I don't want the chlorophyll. The chlorophyll doesn't do shit for me. If I wanted to cook with chlorophyll, I'd use broccoli, I'd use asparagus. It's a hell of a lot cheaper. And I don't care, you know what I mean? I don't care what happens to it. But when you're dealing with cannabis and something that, you know, your trichomes can crack at any point in time if the humidity isn't right. And, you know, that's why we dry them to a certain point and then we take them down and put them in the humidors for safekeeping, so that they don't start cracking and because once your trichomes crack, you know, terpenes are fair game. If the air gets hot enough, they're gonna just go bye-bye. So it's a really kind of a interesting process to get all this stuff done. But that's my infusion process. I literally use like a low heat and time and a lot of shaking. And then the extraction, I literally use a sieve. I have a little wire sieve, and I sit there with a tablespoon, and I press all the butter out of the weed. So I have nice strong arms from doing this all the time. It's like a workout. But that's my process. It's nothing fancy. I'm not here with like an extruder or like a rosin press or any of this fancy shit. I have kitchen tools. I'm a baker.
Yeah, so like this was a question, and I think I kind of get what he said. I think he's asking like what you're using: FICO, hash, flour, trim, indoor, outdoor, stove, indica.
Oh, I think
Sounds like
that's the
sounds like
Tiva
mostly.
indica.
Well, it sounds like you're mostly using flour that you're growing yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I use a lot of homegrown. We grow in hydro, indica sativa, doesn't freaking matter. Actually, that has nothing to do with the cannabinoids or the terpenes that are actually in the flower. It has more to do with the growth structure, and you can learn that from Frenchie too, because he's a smart guy. Indicas originally grew in places that were really arid and they needed to conserve water. So they grew in like big lumps so that as they aspirated water out of their leaves, they could reabsorb it and it wasn't going to evaporate in the hot sun. Where sativas are more long and skinny and have fewer buds per stalk because they grew in places that were more humid and they needed to be spaced out so that the water wouldn't settle on them and stay on them and it was more readily evaporated. So this is all stuff, and he talks about that in the hash, like hash from indica plants is more dry because they're in a drier environment, and hash that's from sativas is more wet because they're in a wetter environment, so therefore it absorbs into the body faster. Indica is a slower uptake. It's just a matter of understanding that dynamic of the plant. It doesn't matter so much for me for cooking purposes, whether it's indica sativa, I don't care, as long as the cannabinoid matches and the terpenes match. Because from there, I can boost it any way I want. I can add alcohol to a recipe to get it to absorb faster if I need it to. I can slow it down by binding it into something like peanut butter, which takes your body a hell of a lot of time to break down. So that's all part of that like amplifier matrix. That's all that stuff. That stuff doesn't matter to me at all. Like I don't look at THC content at all. I don't really give a shit. That number does not impress me. The higher it is, the less I want to look at it because it's not where I look. I'm more interested in what else. Okay, THC, so what? What else? You know,
And
anybody can go anywhere and get that. Like, it's not what I want to work in. So, what else are you gonna give me?
we got extract expert Vermont saying franchise. And then here's another note from Jason Stefano. He said, "What about lecithin?" And I know I've talked to some people about this and say that can also be used.
It can. It's more of a binding agent to get if you don't want to use something like lipid based, like me. Then you can also use lecithin to get it to bind to things like sugar and stuff like that. Me, I like to kind of stay away from the soy products, you know? Just saying.
Oh, they also
For,
make I believe they also make sunflower lecithin.
they do. They do. Um, it's a lot harder to get.
Ah,
That is an issue. But yeah, I don't usually mess with like additives like that. I just usually like to use my butter, use my coconut oil, um, sometimes use alcohol. I like to make crossfaded jello shots once a year and just have full of them. Yeah, so I don't know. Well, if you want to mess with lecithin, I mean, there's probably plenty of people who tell you how to do that. That's not really what I do in my baking, but so I can't really like talk about that too much. But I know some people do use lecithin as a binder for sugars and stuff like that if they're making like maple candies and that sort of a thing. But I don't use it when I make chocolates. I don't use that when I make cherry bombs. I don't use that when I do the stuff that I do.
word up. I'm gonna do this one more time. Shawnna DeMatos, the Baked Gallery. Shawnna, I'm at the end of the list here. I do want to shout out to Dusty here. He gave me one of these terp waters here. And boy,
How are
that's
they?
good. It's water with a little bit of lemon and a little nano tincture or nano emulsion or something. It pretty much just tastes like lemon water. You can't taste the weed at all. And yeah, I thought it was going to be seltzer actually, but it's just straight water. I thought that was pretty nice.
Nice.
Oh yeah, and here's a question. Here's Nick Woodard from Bushy Beard. What up, Nick? How's everyone doing? Thanks for tuning in here, man. And Extract Expert wants to know, what does P.H.A.R.A.O.H stand for? I forgot to ask you that earlier, but it looked like an acronym.
Oh, it is. So the P.H.A.R.A.O. and P.H.A.R.A.O. project stands for Preliminary Homeostasis Activation Research Alliance of Organic
Word up.
So
Here's your
that's all about the homeostasis.
cool. So yeah, I always leave a little time at the end here. I'm gonna pull myself back up. I want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing everything, Shawnna. I really appreciate that, man. What a fucking a beautiful story. You know, like, yeah, just roller coaster ride, and then trying to do something meaningful out of that. I really just appreciate that about you, and I wish you the best of luck. But before we get out of here, if we missed anything that's super important, or if you have any shameless plugs or shout outs, now is the time. And thank you one more time for joining me.
Yeah, well, of course, I would like to thank all the people that I already thanked. Like, of course, you for your time. And, I know the first time that we met, kind of, I was throwing a lot of the really nanoscience at you, and you're like, yeah, no, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Um, so, like, definitely thank you for putting up with me and dealing with the long ass ride around the corner to get to this point. Um, thanks to my grow partner, Extract Expert Vermont. Yeah.
Oh, that's her. Okay, cool. What up?
And my little assistant, Alora, she's amazing. And let's see, Ben, of course, and Olin, who let me use their materials and just, like, help people understand shit. And they're completely with that. So I think that's really awesome. I will thank all the many people that have let me use them as guinea pigs. You guys rock. Um, and I'm looking forward to helping more people out in the future as people get to understand this more and more. I just want to get the information out there. So, I mean, I can't cure the world by myself. So the more people that know this shit, the better off we're all going to be. So that's kind of the goal. And peace, love, and plants. That's the motto all the time. You guys see me, peace, love, and plants, because that's what life should be about.
That seems like a great place to leave it. Shawnna DeMatos. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey, and I still haven't got this in my email yet, but
the devil's in the details, and the details are in the fine print.
peace.
Yeah.